Good afternoon. I'd like to call this meeting of the Lincoln City Council to order. I am Acting Chair Sandra Washington. A copy of the Open Meetings Act is located in the rear of the chambers. The meeting today is part of the ongoing development of the 22-24 city budget. The mayor submitted a proposed budget to council on June 13th. City departments provided further details and information at two council meetings held June 21st and June 22nd. By council resolution, council members were to submit any initial tentative changes to the city budget to the budget office by 3 p.m. last Friday, July 8th. 6 tentative changes were proposed, and those were delivered by the budget office to all council members as well as posted online. Today we will discuss those changes. Later this week, on Wednesday, July 13th at 11:30 a.m., we will vote on whether to move any of the tentative changes forward for the public budget hearing on August 1st, starting at 3 p.m. Following that hearing, council members will have a second opportunity to introduce budget changes by submitting them to the budget office by Friday, August 5th at 3 p.m. The order of business today is as follows. The proposed changes will be taken in order 1 through 6. I will read the change submitted to the budget office with a short description and then invite the proposer, to speak about their proposal and any other information they would like to give. Then I will invite any comments from council members as well as any questions for the proposer or for city staff. As a reminder, we will not be voting on any of these proposals today. That will occur in 2 days on Wednesday, June 13th at 11:30 a.m. in these same council chambers. With that, I will read the first proposal. First proposal was submitted by Council Member McGinnis. Do not fund Health Department Universal Home Visitation Program for newborns and families, consisting of 7 full-time employee public health nurses, 1 full-time employee senior public health nurse, 1 FTE senior office assistant, and a half FTE for the public health epidemiologist. Councilmember McGinnis.
Yes, thank you, Councilperson Washington. Yeah, what I'm doing is I'm asking this whole new program to be not funded at this point. What I'm looking at is that this is a multi-million-dollar expense that the city will have ongoing in the next 3-5 years. There will be quite a bit of money taken out of the funds for this, and I would like to not have this be funded at this time. And it gets back to a lot of reasons, but one of them is the times that we could be in at this point. This is an ongoing fund. It's not a one-time fund. And I have a feeling it'll be interesting to see what our economy will be doing over the next few years. And so to have an ongoing $1 million, $800,000 fund going year after year, I'd like to see it not put into place at this time, adding the 9.5 extra employees.
All right.
Any questions from my fellow?
Councilmember Shub.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. McGinnis. I appreciate you bringing this forward for a conversation piece. You said a couple of times that that you weren't really opposed to it, just not at this time. Those are not your words. That's what you implied. Is that fair to say?
Well, basically what I'm opposed to is just this is not a need, I believe, at this point for the city of Lincoln. It's something that we have other challenges ahead of us that I would like to use the money for instead of putting it into long-term program, as this will be, and adding the 9.5 employees.
I'm sure you have the document from you, and you see that it's not fully funded by state budget by city budget, excuse me, for the first year. You can
correct.
Those are other funds, and I don't know how. There's no budget items like this. We can always adjust on a year-to-year basis. I understand what you're saying. I understand what you're saying about the concerns about our economy and whether our funding will be reduced in the future.
I just don't believe that it would be fair for employees that we would be hiring them, that they could say, well, maybe next year we might not fund this program. So once this is funded, I don't see why it would be fair if we start to hire these people to start this program, then we pull it back in a year or two.
I understand.
That's what so I'd rather not start it.
I understand. Thank you. I appreciate your yielding for questions.
Any comment? Any questions? I have a question for Health Department. If they are in the building. If not, John, I'm going to ask my questions, and if you would relay them to Director Lopez, that would be good. I think I'd like to know. I understand. I looked at the funding. I looked at what I heard what Mr. Shob said, and I understand that this program is being funded with other dollars in the first 2 years, more so in the first year than the second. But then the cost will transfer to the city and county. And I am curious if the health department has looked at the necessity of RNs or whether or not LPNs could be used as a way to curtail costs, if not for all of the positions, if for some.
Okay. Yep, we can find out that answer.
Thank you. Any other questions for staff? If not, we'll go on to proposal number 2. The second proposal, again, offered by Council Member McGinnis. Do not fund the Health Department 1 FTE Environmental Health Educator 2 to address health issues due to changing climate. Council Member.
Yes, and again, the FT Environmental Health Educator, I don't believe there's been a dire need for hiring an extra employee for this position. Again, I hate to say it, but it also gets into educating the public about climate-related risk. And is this a position that the city of Lincoln should be hiring to move forward with? I don't know. I mean, I don't see a real need for a person to do that.
Any comments from other council members or questions for either Councilmember McGinnis or staff? All right, we'll move on to the third proposal submitted by Councilmember McGinnis. Do not fund the health. I think this means do not fund the LTU 1 FTE Environmental Health Educator to reduce the risk of poisoning, injuries, and environmental contamination, as well as increase recycling and waste reduction by the public.
I had a question on this one after I saw this. If you could come forward, or both of you. We got 2 mics.
Teamwork.
So is this a position that was in LTU that is now moving to Health Department?
This is not an LTU request. This is something through the health department. As with a lot of things on our landfill, our hazmat to go, those there's some overlapping responsibilities between the health department and LTU.
So where you see the LTU transfer, that represents that this is funded with landfill occupation tax funding. So there is a transfer. LTU collects that landfill occupation tax, and then they transfer some to the health fund to fund numerous programs and positions, but this position is proposed to be funded by landfill occupation tax.
And when we do our rate modeling, we do coordinate with the health department. We do have a current question out to the health department to make sure that this was captured within our rate modeling, but it's our belief that this is captured within the increase that we have asked for, the 5% increase for landfill.
So in essence, this could be being paid by the people that pay for the garbage, right?
Ultimately,
Garbage
yes.
haulers with fees that you collect from them.
Right. This would be our fees directly to the haulers, who then obviously pass that on to customers.
I haven't had a chance to really dig into this one all the way, but I will
Okay.
before Wednesday and let you know.
All right.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, number 4, the fourth proposal was presented by Councilmember McGinnis and is add $1 million to the Fast Forward Fund for business recruitment, retention, and expansion.
Yes,
Take the
and
floor.
this was just regarding our promise that we would continue to fund the Fast Forward Fund after we removed the money earlier this year. So this is putting money back into the Fast Forward Fund in a way, I had promised, and I had heard others say they would start to refund the Fast Forward Fund. So this is a place setter to put that in there for now.
Okay. Any comments or questions? I do have a question, Mr. McGinnis. When the Fast Forward Fund was funded initially, I didn't get the impression that it was funded out of general revenue.
It was funded out of the special revolving.
Yeah, special
assessment.
revolving. And so I guess I wanted to know whether or not, and this might be for staff, are there any of those kinds of funds, special revolving funds, available to fund Fast Forward? So could we repeat ourselves?
At this point in time, no, we don't have that same funding source available, so that is definitely an issue that we would ask you to give us direction on if this proposal goes forward. Essentially, what would the funding source be for that $1 million?
I agree that we need to talk about where the source would be. But again, what I like about it, it's a one-time cost. It's not an ongoing cost.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right. Item number 5, submitted by Council Member Shob, add $300,000 to the urban development budget to enhance the housing programs and neighborhood revitalization with a focus on items 1, 2, 14, 48, and 49 in the Lincoln Climate Action Plan. Funding to be used to educate and incentivize individuals replacing central heating and cooling units of the value and benefit of considering a heat pump as a replacement option. Councilmember Shob, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I remember to turn my microphone on this time. I've had lots of conversations with members of our community who acknowledge we have a climate action plan and would like to see us do more in those efforts to reduce our carbon footprint. I think this would be an opportunity for us to make education available to the public and perhaps offer incentives to people who find themselves in a position where they're replacing a central heating and air unit, something that they were going to do anyway. And we might assist them in finding a more energy efficient one that reduces the carbon footprint of the city and follows the tenets of the climate action plan that I outlined in my statement. I'd like to do some ongoing discussions about that and perhaps move some money there to support that.
Any council
Yeah,
member?
just a quick
McGinnis?
question. You said money to be used to educate and incentivize.
Yes.
Are you thinking a rebate of some sort to somebody that would?
Well, we have a few programs in place in our city right now that offer partial incentives to people replacing those, and sometimes they don't cover the full cost. And so I think lots of people might consider using a more fuel efficient one or more environmentally conscious unit, but the cost gets in the way. So as needed, and I've spoke with a couple departments, there are programs in place, and this money might be used, and big word, might be used to supplement those.
Would this be an one time? Or is this a multi-year?
I would love to say multi-year, but right now I'm just thinking a one time to see if there's a need for the, yeah.
Okay.
As we know, there are other programs put on by other agencies in the city, and sometimes that money doesn't get all used. And so I'd hate to earmark money that's not getting used. And again, we could readjust that as the budget cycle goes on. If it's not used, we could reallocate. But at this point, yes, just one time.
Okay. Thanks.
I have a question.
Yes.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Did you have a question?
I do not.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Shob, I have a question about maybe the pilot nature of this. So are you looking at 300 over the 2-year period as a pilot program for incentivizing
That was
people?
my initial thought, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right. And we are down to the last item, budget number 6, submitted by Councilmember Washington. This is to add $100,000 to the LTU watershed CIP for, I'm going to start again because it was written once on Friday and I rewrote it to be more clear over the weekend, and I'd like to read the preferred and more clear language, if you don't mind. To add $100,000 for fiscal year 22-23 of the LTU Watershed Capital Improvement Program to fund an environmental impact analysis of development in the upper watershed of Salt Creek within the planning horizon of the 2050 Comprehensive Plan. I'll call on myself. I'd like to. Oh, well, thank you. I think all of us remember the conversations about the Wilderness Crossing Development Project and the number of concerns raised by residents concerning what might full build out of the Salt Creek watershed look like. What are the likely impacts? This is not to stop development, but to understand what development pressures in the upper Salt Creek watershed might do to all of us who live lower down in the watershed. And Council Member Raybould and myself were both interested in an environmental analysis of those impacts, and I'd like to create a one-time pot of money to be used in LTU's budget to look at watershed impacts. Any questions?
It'd be a study, right?
It'd be a study,
Okay.
yeah. And 100,000 is a ballpark. It might come in for less. All right. If there are no other questions of council members or for staff, I would call this meeting almost to a close, but since Councilwoman Raybould just came in, I want to give you an opportunity. We've had a chance to look at 6 proposals submitted. And if you have any questions, I'll give you a moment there to review. If you have any questions about any of the 6 proposals, please ask them now of a number of us, and then Councilman Shob.
I'll give her a moment to look. So, Madam Chair, this is just our introduction portion of the program. We have until voting time on Wednesday to discuss, flesh out, change maybe, talk with our fellow colleagues and see where we are. Is that fair for me to assume?
That is fair to assume. Any comments or questions? All right. Well, that concludes the list of tentative budget proposals. Thank you, council members and city staff, for your time today. We will reconvene regarding the budget this Wednesday, July 13th at 11:30 a.m. in council chambers to vote on these proposals. And with that, we are adjourned.